Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. All right. Hello. Happy Monday. If you are in or from the United States and Canada, happy Labor Day. I hope that you are having a great long weekend. I have two cats with me right now, which is one of the reasons why I'm like, I don't want to talk too loud, because little elusive Astra is like right here. And they've kind of been hopping in and out of frame. So maybe you guys will actually get to see Astra this time before Indy comes back, because during the live stream, Indy's going to be dropped off at some point. So at that point, Astra will definitely be gone. But for now, she might even hop up onto the desk momentarily. You guys might see it. So she is. Hang on. Let me actually move this so you guys can maybe see her. There she is. Ah. Hey, kitty. Hi. All right. So that is our sweet little, wonderful little Astra. So, all right. I hope you guys are having a great Monday. Happy Monday. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope you guys are having a great Monday. Either way, regardless of whether it's Labor Day for you or not. If it is, and you're still tuning in, and normally this is like background noise for work, I appreciate you spending some of your holiday with us. Otherwise, for everybody else, I'm just glad to see you again, regardless. So, okay, let's get into it, shall we? Today, we've got more Lyle Menendez. We are probably going to be getting into some cross-examination, I think. If not, then for sure next time. We will. There is someone at the door that's either India or it's pizza. It's one of those two things, but Mr. Bites is going to get it. Anyhow, so more Lyle Menendez, more of him. We were starting to get into the later years of his relationship with his parents. Last time we got into a bit more about his mom, particularly, and it was largely about how her behavior seemed to have gotten more erratic, to the point that Jose was really placating her a lot, according to Lyle. This is, his testimony, and which is very, very different from what his behavior was with her before. He would constantly, deride her, make fun of her, use her as the butt of every single joke. And other witnesses have testified to this as well, where they say that there was something changed when they moved to California, that now all of a sudden he was being very, very, very calm and very loving, and kind of like giving her deference in public, which he had never done before. So there is some corroboration with what Lyle is saying here, but he's saying that the real reason for it's pizza. Yeah. What do you want? No, I'll have some later. It's fine. Thank you. Take whatever you want. Why don't you want pizza right now? Oh, because I don't like eating food when I'm live streaming. If I can help it. I'm self-conscious about it. Love you. Gotta love Mr. Bites offering me food on live streams. So anyhow, we've got a different sort of window because of Lyle saying that this is the real reason why. It wasn't because, suddenly things actually got better. Things actually got worse for them at home because, she kept threatening to unalive herself and basically take everyone with her. So anyway, so that's what we saw last week. So now up to today, what are we going to hear from Lyle? I anticipate it's going to be getting into the gruesome details of, when he and Erik decided to purchase the shotguns and move forward. Shireen, thank you. Thank you. We all have pizza, see emojis. You can have some too. Thank you. But I can wait a little bit. And actually, I was not being completely honest. I do have some snack, but I don't like having a full meal. But anyway, okay, so we're probably going to get into those gruesome details because right up to where we ended was where we started. It was the toupee situation where Kitty had torn off Lyle's toupee that his dad had prompted him to wear. Erik hadn't known about it apparently, and this prompted him to open up about the secrets that he was keeping about their parents, and particularly about their father, that he was still abusing him in the most intimate, horrific way. So, I anticipate that that's gonna come into like them trying to figure out, them acting on they're trying to figure out what to do about all of this, because that's sort of where that ended. Okay. All right. Let's get into the actual testimony to continue on with that little bit of recap. And with that, if you are watching and you are enjoying, do us a favor and like the video, if you so choose, because it does help to sort of push this out into the YouTube ether, for folks to find this whole project. It's a long-term project. Obviously, we are in episode 36, which is crazy that we are 36 episodes into this trial. We're a good way through it, but we still have plenty of testimony to go. So if you guys wouldn't mind, liking it is the best thing that you can do for the channel. And otherwise, I'm so happy to see all of you guys here. And let's continue on, shall we? Okay.
Mr. Menendez, before we broke for lunch.
And also, as always, let me know if there's any issues with sound balance.
You were talking about Tuesday night, which would have been the 15th of August. You said you stayed up most of the night?
All night.
And why were you staying awake late at night?
Just couldn't sleep. No, because of what had happened with Erik and conversation. Just, he was also sleeping there with me.
Did you somehow feel responsible for what had been happening to Erik all that time?
Yeah.
What were your feelings about? What were your feelings about what your brother had?
See, that's definitely an example of leading, is to say, like, did you feel responsible for this? Like, this is clearly the answer that she's hoping for him to give, right? Is yes, I felt very responsible for this. Because realistically, is he going to answer no, I didn't feel responsible? I don't know. I mean, maybe, but based on what we've heard so far, responsibility is kind of a thing that he was sort of feeling. So this is definitely a leading question and a proper objection by the prosecution here. And also, I can't believe I forgot this. Draco Amy, thank you so much for the reminder. Trigger warning. I mean, we're going to get into probably some gruesome details here. Obviously, there's all kinds of abuse that's been alleged throughout this entire trial and through this testimony in particular, all kinds of horrific stuff. So if that is something that is triggering for you, squeamish, makes you squeamish in any kind of a way, uncomfortable, do what you need to do if you are feeling yourself being mentally, adversely affected by this. There's zero need for you to, put yourself in a bad place, emotionally and mentally, for the purposes of this live stream or the series. Do what you need to do to to keep yourself healthy and strong. Let's continue on. But otherwise, for we're gonna probably put this up on the screen from time to time, just so that everybody has that trigger warning, especially for newcomers coming in. All right, thanks.
They had told you in terms of your role in it.
I felt that I basically I just felt like didn't seem like there was anything he could do. And I tried to think what I would do if what happened with my dad had continued. And it was hard to imagine. But, I couldn't get out of my mind what had happened between my brother and I. And so in that way, I did feel responsible.
Did you ever think, well, maybe he should go to somebody else for help? Maybe he should talk to one of your relatives instead of you, that you weren't the right person to take care of this?
No, I figured I wished he would have come to me a long time before. And I can't imagine he would go to anyone other than me.
Wednesday morning or Wednesday during the day, did you spend any more time with your brother?
Wednesday morning?
Wednesday during the day.
Wednesday during the day, we spent the whole, that part of the day together. We went to UCLA and went to get something to eat at the Olive Garden restaurant there in Westwood. And we had lunch. We talked about the future. And
what did you talk about the future?
Just keeping spirits up that things are going to work out with Dad, and he was going to be with me. It looked like it was going to be Princeton at first, and his life was going to change, and that was the main thing we wanted. And basically just optimism about the fact that what choice did Dad have, and he was going to be free, and his life was going to change, and that it would be great for me to have him at Princeton, and I'd always wanted to be close to him. And there had been a conflict way back when I wanted Erik to go to Princeton with me, and Dad wouldn't allow that. I wouldn't even let him apply. He didn't want us together. So now we would be together, maybe.
Did you talk to your mom at all that day?
I talked to her in the afternoon or early evening, and I wanted to get her to maybe, I was starting to feel, even though we had this conversation, my brother and I felt optimistic. I just felt like because of my dad's pride, maybe my mom, who seemed to have so much power in the family at that point, she could convince him to let Erik go. Just felt that all those feelings that she had against myself and really my brother at that point in her life, I could use that to my advantage, and she would probably agree, get rid.
How could you use those feelings to your advantage?
Just, once I told her what the situation was, that I figured she'd be ecstatic to talk to Dad and basically get Erik out of the house and sort of be more rid of us farther away, and possibly feeling that she could cause a rift between my dad and I with this information, which I didn't think that she could do. but at the very least, she would help me, because I definitely felt the two of them would talk about it, and so I went to get her help for that.
And what did you say to her when you talked to her?
I talked to her in her bedroom and just told her. I don't remember. I remember telling her that there were going to be some changes with regards to Erik living in the house, probably, and possibly even going to live with me at Princeton. She wasn't understanding this, and I don't remember the whole conversation, but basically, I said that I had to explain, and I said that Dad was doing things to Erik, that I had found that out. And she said, "What things?" And she got very angry, and I said, "Sexual things," and she just exploded again, similar to that she had Tuesday, and said that basically all I remember is she saying that Erik's lying and coming toward me and saying, if I want to talk to my dad, I mean, if I want to, I don't remember her exact words, but basically that I was going to have to deal with my dad. She wasn't going to talk about it, and I couldn't get her to stay and talk about it. And so she left, and I just left.
Did you try to get her to stay and talk about it?
I continued talking to her, but when, she was in a rage, you couldn't talk to her. I wasn't going to get close to her. And so afterwards, I told my brother I had a conversation with her, and it hadn't gone very well.
Did you tell him the details of the conversation?
Well, not really. I didn't tell him that I had actually told her what was going on between he and my dad.
Why didn't you tell him?
I felt it was a big mistake, basically, the conversation. And
why did you think it was a big mistake?
I mean, I thought it was risky going into the conversation. I didn't really want to. I was hoping that, it would be helpful, and it turned out to be the opposite effect. And she was angry, and she was clearly going to go talk to my dad now in a different tone than I had wanted her to. And I just felt that my brother would think that it would have been stupid, and very upset that now his mother knew. And I basically didn't want him to be angry with me, so I didn't tell him.
So you felt you'd made a mistake?
Yes, I had.
Did you talk to your mother anymore on Wednesday?
No.
Did you talk to your dad at all on Wednesday?
No.
Was he home?
No.
What day was he supposed to come home?
Thursday.
When did you expect him to come home? What time?
Thursday. My mom told me sometime in the evening, and I believed it was 8 o'clock, as she told me.
And what were you going to do when he got home?
I was going to talk to him like my brother and I had discussed, and tell him what we had decided, or what I had decided.
Did you do anything to prepare for this talk?
Well, I spent that whole evening in the, I'm not sure exactly how long, but I spent many hours in the living room, just preparing notes and taking notes, and deciding exactly what I was going to say, writing it out, and then...
Why were you preparing notes and writing it out?
Well, I'd never really, I did have the conversation before with my dad, but we were much older now, and this is going to be my dad's, like I said, he seemed he seemed like a very angry person, and at that point in his life, and I had just great concern that I was going to end up failing in this conversation. I was going to start crying. I had a problem with crying whenever I talked to my dad, not being able to get the words out. And this conversation was so important. And couldn't let my brother down at that point and had to go ahead with it. And I was being kind of queasy. And so I figured that the shorter the conversation, the better. The fewer words, the better. And so I wrote it out, and I just trying to make it shorter and shorter and just get across what I want to get across.
How many times did you write it out and rewrite it?
A few times, and cross things out, and just had my notes with me when he came home.
And how were you feeling while you were waiting for him to come home?
Very nervous, thinking that I was going to screw up.
Did he show up at the time that you expected?
No, my mother said his flight was postponed.
How'd that make you feel?
I didn't think she was telling me the truth, actually. So I didn't really feel anything other than that she was lying. I was confused by the time change, and I thought, because I just couldn't think of any reason why the flight would be delayed coming into LA, and I just thought maybe she hadn't told me the real time, thinking I was going to leave and she was going to get to talk to Dad first. But then I thought she would probably just meet him at the airport and so on, so maybe that wasn't it. So I didn't really know what to think, but she did say it was changed to quite a bit later, like I think somewhere around 11.
What effect did that have on you? Did it calm you down? Or?
No, I had another few hours, and I was already just, wanting to get into the conversation with him and get through it, and it just made me more nervous. And my brother also called at some point, very nervous. He was in Westwood, and he had left the house earlier with the understanding that he would be in Westwood hanging out until I was done talking to Dad. He didn't want to be in the house. And so he called in to see what happened. I told him nothing. His flight's postponed till real late. So he said he would come back later.
And did your dad eventually get home?
Yes.
And what was his arrival at home like? What do you remember about that?
I remember him. I remember the limo arriving, hearing it come in the carport. I remember the bags being gotten together, and him opening the doors. And I was in the living room, and my mother came into the foyer, and he came in like he always does, kind of like, went over to say hello Kitty, and like a hurricane, just bags all over the place, and real up in spirits. And he saw me, and I told him right away that I needed to talk to him. And he kind of looked at me disappointed.
What did he do next?
He went upstairs. He told me he was going to go change, and he went upstairs with my mother.
And
he told me to wait in the study where we always had our talks.
Was it unusual for you to say you wanted to talk to him?
It was very unusual, and might have happened before, but that would almost never happen. Certainly not any big issue.
So he goes upstairs to change his clothes. How long before he comes back down?
Maybe like half hour, 45 minutes, somewhere around there. Maybe not that long. I can't remember. It seemed like a long time.
And where's your mother during this time?
Mom was upstairs with Dad.
And he had told you to wait for him in the study. Is that correct?
Right.
Did you go into the study as soon as he told you to go in there?
Yeah.
Did you remain in there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you go up the stairs and say, "What's taking so long? I need to talk to you. This is important"? Or?
No, I remember sitting on the couch. I think it was the little green couch, and I remember wanting to get my notes out of my pocket to look at them because I was starting to blank out, and too afraid. I didn't want Dad to catch me, obviously, with notes. So that would be the first sign of weakness. So I didn't look at him, and I just waited, and I tried to think about what I wanted to say, but I was real nervous. And he came down.
And what happened when he came down? Did he come into the study?
he came into the study, and he sat in the higher chair that we have there.
So a chair that was higher than where you were seated?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And first thing I noticed is that he hadn't changed, which actually didn't surprise me, but made me nervous.
Why did you say it didn't surprise you?
I knew that he would be talking to my mother upstairs, and I knew that was why he wanted to go upstairs, was to talk to my mother. At least that's what I felt. And he came down in his suit and with his jacket off, and he just sat there and he lit a cigarette and he waited.
Did he say anything like, what's going on, or what do you need to talk to me about, or did he just sit there and wait?
No, he just waited.
And what did you do?
I waited, and we had this awkward period, waiting for my dad to talk first, because he always does. And eventually I realized he wasn't, and so I just sort of went ahead with what I had planned to say as best I could.
What did you
which
say?
Was that I knew everything that was going on between him and Erik, and that it had to stop, and that it had to end, and that I didn't want to disrupt the family, and I wasn't going to tell anybody, but that there had to be some changes, and if I had to, we would come out of the house, we would leave the house if he didn't want us to live there, but that we wanted to live there for now, and I wanted to take Erik to Princeton with me, and then maybe transfer to UCLA, and that this had to happen, and that I meant it.
How did you feel when you were telling him all this?
Sort of just really worrying about the words more than anything.
And did you say it all at one time like you did here, or did you say something and then he said something?
No, he didn't say anything. He was looking around the room, and he had his cigarette lit, and I remember he was playing with his ear, like he does a lot.
Did he look at you at all during this?
Didn't look at me at all, which at some point I was sort of rambling, trying to get all the words out. At some point I realized I had finished saying what I was saying, and I stopped, and we had another silence. And then he said,
Did he continue looking around and playing with his ear during this silence? Or did he change?
Well, I don't remember, but at some point, once I stopped, he asked me if I was finished. And then I said that I was. And he put his cigarette, he had crossed his legs were crossed, he put his cigarette out. And then he started talking.
And did his position change, or did he just...
No, now he was looking at me, and he was basically looking down at me, so I was pretty far below him, because this couch sort of just sunk back in it, and he said what he said, which is...
What did he say?
Basically, he said, "You listen to me."
What was his tone of voice?
Very, his usual tone of voice when you had better understand what he was saying.
Can you do it? Can you imitate it?
Pretty well.
Can you show me?
He just said, "You listen to me." And
what else did he say? And if you can do it the way he said it to you.
I remember most of what he said. He said, "What I do with my son is none of your business." And he said, "I warn you, don't throw your life away. Just stay out of it."
Interesting that he says that the response from him was, "What I do with my son is my business." As in, he's obviously his son as well. So it's almost as if Lyle got this idea of, Erik's mother, Erik's father. This is something that has come up several times so far, where, people in the chat have noticed this, where it's like linguistically, there's this interesting thing that he's doing that feels like it's like he's distancing, he has his relationship with his parents, and Erik has his relationship with his parents. Even though they're the same parents and they're brothers, it's like they have two separate tracks almost within this family. And it's almost as if that response from him, assuming that it is verbatim what Jose actually said, there could be all kinds of reasons why, he might be slightly misremembering, or he might be, placing some words of his own to sort of paraphrase. But if Jose was in the habit of saying, like, Erik is my son over here, Lyle is my son over here, that could also be suggestive of why Lyle is referring to it as, Erik's mom, Erik's dad. So it's interesting. And yes, this is a very, very tense moment, because I feel like what happens at the end of, like, however this conversation concludes should lead to what exactly happened, or what the decisions that were made by Erik and Lyle. It sounds like, I mean, obviously Lyle has his whole escape plan that he has for Erik. He tries initially to talk to Kitty, their mother, to say, look, things are going to be changing. Lyle is not going to be around anymore. He's going to be maybe coming with me to the East Coast to live, over at Princeton. And it's because this is what's going on. And her immediate response is, nope, that's not happening. Absolutely incorrect. He's lying. And just kind of flying off the handle, as she had previously with, a completely separate conversation. And this conversation so far seems to be going about as we might expect for a conversation like this. And also, for those of you that are popping in also, so there is I apologize if I'm a little bit distracted from time to time. We do have momentarily Astra, our other shy kitty, in the studio. She's currently on the floor over there, but she's been hopping up and on and off of the desk today. She is never here for any of these live streams, because Indy is usually here with us. And Astra is super shy, and so she keeps a wide distance between herself and Indy basically at all times. Indy's she's on her way home, so Astra's not going to be in here for too much longer. But so for those that have been all about wanting to see a little bit of Astra, she is here today. So she's popping in and out for treats. So just a little bit of lightheartedness for folks, in the midst of this difficult testimony that we are watching here. Definitely very, very tense. Okay. All right. That's all I've got for right now. Let's continue on.
I remember that. And then he said something else. And then he said that, let me tell you what's going to happen. He said, you're going back to Princeton, and your brother's going to UCLA like we planned. And we're going to forget this conversation ever took place.
And when he finished talking, what happened?
I interrupted him. He didn't get to finish talking. Oh, he started saying this, and I knew what was happening. It was just like our other conversations we had, where he was just dismissing it. And I told him, I swore and told him he was a fucking sick person. And I told him no, and that he wasn't going to touch my brother again. And I threatened him.
How did you threaten him?
I told him that I would tell everybody I would tell everybody everything about him. I would tell the police, and that I would tell the family. And
Did you
I was yelling, and it was pretty. I may have said some more things and swore at him or something. And as soon as
How were you feeling?
I was feeling like I was losing control of the conversation. It wasn't going to go well. I had a feeling it wasn't going to go well. And I also was bracing myself for a punch or something physical. And it seemed like he was going to do that when I was saying those things to him. So I don't think anybody had ever spoken to him like that in his whole life.
Were you pretty out of control when you were?
I was
you did
pretty.
it on purpose, or had you lost control?
No, I had lost control because my brother and I had discussed me not threatening him if at all possible. And I didn't really think that I was going to have to. And I ended up just doing it. And that was a mistake.
So you're screaming at him, you're telling him he's sick, and you're going to tell everybody.
Right.
What's he doing while you're doing this?
Well, he seemed like he was going to attack me in some way, or I don't know. He was leaning forward. His legs are uncrossed. And that's basically all I remember. And then after I threatened him, his demeanor changed pretty drastically.
How did it change?
He sort of relaxed. He sat back, and he just sort of looked at me, and that made me stop because he seemed so relaxed.
What happened after you stopped?
Then he said, "We all make choices in life, son. Erik made his, and you've made yours." And then he just looked at me, and he got up to leave.
What did you think?
I thought, oh my God, he thinks I'm going to tell people, regardless. I knew what he was thinking, and I told him, I started pleading with him before he left. I got up and said, Dad, I'm only going to tell people if you don't stop touching Erik, if it doesn't stop. And he just looked at me and said, you're going to tell everyone anyway. And he left. And I sat back down, thinking that it was a disaster, and that my brother I had just made it 100 times worse.
What did you think was going to happen?
I thought we were in danger. I thought he felt he had no choice.
But to what?
That he would kill us, that he would get rid of us in some way.
Why?
Because he thought I was going to ruin him. And he was going to tell my mother what I said. And I knew immediately what.
Sorry, guys. As you can tell, Indy is home. And she's very excited to be home, which is wonderful. Let me pause it real quick so that things kind of calm down a little bit, because this is I was a little bit distracted, unfortunately. So pausing it real quick so that I can make sure to get the rest of it. But this is a very good point. Matthew Harris Law PLLC, admitting to losing control in front of the jury is extremely detrimental. If you're able to lose control once, who knows what you're capable of? Yes, because exactly. So that's something that is not so good for him. There has to be some sort of a showing of like what's different between this losing control and the next losing control, or next not losing control, right? But uncivil law, fair point. Show me a person that says they never loses control, and I'll show you a liar. So I mean, yeah, this is two different ways that a jury can look at this kind of a situation right now. Okay, let's continue.
What her reaction would be. You can never let that happen to us. And
what do you mean to never let that happen to us? What do you mean by that?
Well, their image was their life. At least that's how I felt, especially about my mother. And I don't know I thought afterwards exactly what my dad was thinking that I was going to do, because I would never have ever told anybody. But I did make that threat, and I think he just felt that maybe my own stuff with him, or I was trying to get revenge or something. Or I'm not sure what he thought.
Why do you say you wouldn't have ever told anybody?
I would not have done that to him. I would never have told people. It was really an idle threat. I never had thought about telling people. I didn't know who I was going to tell. I wasn't going to tell the police. I wasn't going to tell relatives. I would have.
See, this is potentially problematic for him. Because, he says he wouldn't have told the police. He wouldn't have told other people. Well, why? I mean, if you're in a desperate situation, I mean, I would want to know why he wouldn't tell the police. Is it because, oh my gosh, Indy, she's so excited. Is it because he thinks that, he wouldn't be believed? Is it because it's very shameful for him? I would want to know why, because otherwise, for someone who hasn't experienced what he says that he has experienced, I want to understand how he gets to. Oh, sorry. I still have to text. I would want to understand how he gets to the place where he says that there are no other alternatives other than to enact this violence upon their parents. Because it seems like that would be one option for trying to get out of this situation, is to tell the police, to tell family members, to tell someone. But this is, and okay, your everyday sheep, this is fair. This is where psychiatric expert testimony becomes really important. Fair, because without having been in a position like that, it's hard for someone to understand, because there are unique things that people do, that when they are abused in various ways, sometimes people will make decisions that your average person who hasn't been through those experiences, those decisions sometimes seem really counterintuitive, right? Or just straight up illogical. So yeah, Debbie, yeah. So Diane says that he told her when he was really little. Lyle, I think, said in his testimony that he didn't remember telling her. He didn't remember telling, anyone, which is interesting, because he has every interest in saying, yes, of course I told her, right? Because that lines up testimony very, very well. But if he says, I don't remember saying that, that actually sounds more honest to me. So there has to be some sort of an explanation for why he says that was an empty threat that he was making to his father about telling people. It's because otherwise that's a little bit of a red flag for the defense, or for the jury on the defense side.
Would have taken my brother out of the house before I had this conversation, but I wouldn't have just told people.
How long did you stay in the den after your dad left?
Not long. I went back. I pretty much, after I thought about the conversation a few minutes, I went straight to the guest house and waited for Erik, and figured he would be coming home.
And did you see Erik later on that night?
Yes.
When was it that you saw Erik?
I saw Erik.
How much after the conversation?
Not very long. I don't remember how long, but not very long. And I saw him with Mom.
And what were
Actually, I heard the screaming between Erik and Mom. And then I heard my brother running up I live on the second floor. Heard him running up the stairs and opened the door.
Where did you hear the screaming from? From outside?
Just outside,
from the
yeah.
house?
Just outside.
And could you tell what the words were, or you could just hear the voices?
I couldn't tell what the words were, but I knew it was my mother and Erik.
And did they come inside at some point in time?
Erik came in, running in first, screaming that Mom knows. And I sort of grabbed him and said, Mom knows what? And he said about Dad and I, and he was screaming and he was crying too. Then I didn't have a chance to talk to him again because my mother came running in up the stairs. Just extremely upset from the conversation she had with Erik. And
So you said you tried to calm Erik down, or you grabbed Erik in some way, and then your mother came in?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do after that?
I confronted her. I reacted from what Erik said and just accused her and said, "How can you not have done anything? How could you have known?"
What did you say? I mean, were you saying it calmly like you are now, or?
No, I was yelling too. You had to yell to get anything in when my mother was in that state, and so I was yelling.
What were you yelling?
Something to the effect of, "How could you not have done anything? How could you know?" I don't remember the exact words. And she immediately said that I knew. I had known what was going on. She said nobody ever helped her. And then...
Did you know what she meant by that? Nobody'd ever helped her?
No. Although I could guess. But then I said something about that how could she say that I knew and I didn't do anything, and we were yelling, and at that point she just said she hated us and swore at us and called us a bastard and just ran out of the room and back down the stairs. And then my brother and I started talking.
What did you and your brother start talking about?
Well, as soon as my mom left, he started screaming that Dad was going to kill us. And that Mom knows and they're going to kill us. And I said, "What did Dad say? How do you know that?" And I tried to get out of him what had happened. And because it was he said something had happened to him in the room. Dad had come upstairs. I guess he had gone up to his room, and Dad had found him in his room or heard him in the room and done something to him, which I don't remember exactly what he said he did, but he did something to him. And had started yelling at him about how he had screwed up and betrayed him, and he had told me, and now I was going to ruin him, and that he was never going to let that happen.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. The statement attributed to Erik Menendez by Lyle Menendez is received not for its truth, but just to reflect the state of mind of Lyle Menendez.
And then that's basically what I remember he said. He said a few other things, and I don't remember exactly, but he was convinced they were going to kill us. He was then wanted to know what I had said to Dad, and basically was very hysterical, accusing me of doing something that we hadn't talked about or something. And I told him that I had threatened him, and that I told him what he had said, and I felt that they could kill us.
Was Erik mad at you for what you had done?
He was mad, and he was clearly still hysterical about whatever had happened with his dad not too long before. And I was very shaken up by the fact that Dad had done anything to him at all, because I did not expect that. In fact, that was the last thing I ever could imagine. And I immediately felt like we had to get out of the house.
So did you leave the house then?
No, we talked about it first.
What did you talk about?
We tried to relax and went over to the couches like we had before and talked. And I said, we need to get out of the house. He clearly felt they were going to kill us. I believed the same thing. And we just had to get out of the house. And he immediately said that he couldn't, and that would be the craziest thing to do, and that he wasn't going to just run away and let Dad find him and kill him. And
why was it going to be the craziest thing to do, to run away?
Well, that's what he said, and we talked about it, and we talked about a lot of different options, but that was the one that I wanted to do, and I asked him why he felt that, and he looked at me like I was crazy with the dad's power and who he was and who my mother was, that where were we going to go? And he kept asking me that in a very, like, how could I think that way? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to hide? And we started to talk about it, and I agreed pretty quickly that there was no place that my parents could not find us, and that would, running away, since we decided that we couldn't be positive that they were going to kill us, and we didn't certainly know when or how, and that might be safer to stay in the house and not bring it to a head by running away.
How would it bring it to the head if your parents found that you were gone the next morning? How would that bring it to a head?
Well, obviously, I just felt that if I took off with my brother and we were gone past the evening, he would think I was, that would be he would immediately think I was telling people. Wasn't even going to wait. And, nothing could be more alarming to him. And I thought, I didn't think that he could kill us immediately. But I did think it was just a matter of time. My brother and I both felt that. So we talked about other things we could do briefly.
Well, what options did you talk about in terms of running away? Did you talk about going to relatives?
We talked about telling relatives
And-
the situation. Well, actually, Erik mentioned relatives on the other coast. And I told him the closest person I was to that I trusted was Aunt Terry.
Yeah.
And almost everything that happened in my life over there, my mom found out, and that I was sure it was Terry. And that was a really bad option. And we really didn't, I wasn't going to go to any of my tennis coaches, and there was nobody that we felt we could go to where we would be safe for any length of time. So we talked about the police, and that was pretty much dismissed right away.
Why?
We just felt, we could go to the police and explain to them the situation, but what could they do? I mean, they might press charges against my dad, and then we would be through for sure. And, then that would be trying to ruin him. And I didn't feel the police could protect us. But it was certainly, we talked about it very briefly, but seriously, and then just felt that, mostly we felt that if I went to the police, that they would kill us for sure, and that the police would not be able to protect us. And also, we're in Beverly Hills. My dad was a rich guy and with a lot of power, and there was some concern that, not that they wouldn't believe us, but that they wouldn't do anything.
What about, why weren't your relatives, your other relatives? You talked about Aunt Terry, but you have other relatives. Why couldn't you go to?
Well, my Aunt Terry is the only relative that I knew that stood up to my dad on anything. And again, she seemed to relay the information of what was happening with me to my mom. So that wasn't a possibility. And everybody else was just completely intimidated by my father, looked up to him. Even the men in the family who were the strongest, people like Carlos Baralt and other, the male members, the uncles, came to him for business advice, to look over their dealings, to get his 2 cents. And it just wasn't realistic to say, here we are, we have this problem. This is what my dad's doing, protect us.
What about?
Well, okay. So these are some pretty reasonable explanations in my opinion for why they decided not to go to other people in the family. I mean, Aunt Terry, Lyle definitely seemed very close with Aunt Terry, and yet somehow everything that he was doing, every single thing that he was doing at Princeton, somehow his parents found out about it. like as soon as possible. And yeah, Aunt Terry is Jose's sister. So, it seems that she was kind of basically like an informant for the parents. Um, and Jose also would just randomly drop in on him on the East Coast as well, because New Jersey's not far from New York, and he was relatively frequently in New York for business. But this kind of, it, it- I'm definitely understanding how they could sort of kind of go through the list of like, okay, coaches, all of them are under the thumb of their parents, because they're only kept so long as they're doing what Jose wants them to do. Then you've got the family members, all of them are either kind of like informing on them to their parents, or they also themselves are sort of relying on being in Jose's good graces for various reasons, for business dealings, for advice, for various things. And then there's the official like local like municipal protection in Beverly Hills. You've got this very rich, powerful man. A, maybe they won't be believed. B, if they are believed, maybe they'll be just relatively dismissed because they don't want to take down someone who is so rich and powerful. The police just decide not to, press charges against someone like that. And then they've gone and told the police, and, maybe he'll find out about it one way or another because someone will have talked to him from the police or something along those lines, right? And then there's retaliation. Then there's, okay, well, what about if they do decide to do something, then they press charges? Then there's this idea that the police may not be able to protect them from Jose, because even if Jose himself is, let's say he's jailed for whatever reason, prior to any sort of official trial, et cetera, then there's still a possibility that Jose could hire someone because he entirely has those sort of means to hire someone to enact some kind of revenge or something along those lines. And when you consider the fact that Jose and Kitty were so concerned about their image, that was like number one for them. That is something that has been stressed time and time again here. The idea that something potentially could come out about them could be the kind of thing that would take them over the edge in an act of desperation and eliminate the possibility of this coming out. So I can understand. Now, I just said a few minutes ago, I'm like, we need some kind of an explanation for why they wouldn't have gone to family, why they wouldn't have gone to the police. So, but, the way that he's explaining it right now, I'm kind of seeing it. I understand. I understand here, why he's saying this. And already he's kind of tipped his hand a little bit by saying, we're going to go and tell people. That already could trigger that sort of response from Jose, who has already said before to Lyle while punching him in the face, right? That if he ever, sort of like makes a show in front of somebody else to stand up to him, that he's going to kill him. Then there have also been other threats from Kitty along the way. This is obviously according to Lyle's testimony, right? So, everything with a little bit of a grain of salt, because we have not gotten to cross-examination yet. We'll see how this all holds up. But, Kitty has also, made her threats also against the entire family. And both of them cared about image above all else. And there already has been this threat by Lyle saying that he's going to go and tell people. So I can understand how this interaction not ending up the way that they had hoped it would end up has resulted in things actually getting even worse and even more desperate. I can definitely sense that sort of building anxiety.
But just running away, going and living in a foreign country.
Well, we just didn't feel that we could do that.
Why?
Because we didn't feel that it was safe. We felt that he could find us. My dad flies all over the world, And it was more than that. It was more than just the money and the flying and stuff. It was that I felt my dad had the connections to find us and to get rid of us. And if we ran away, he could do that at his leisure. And, he could just tell a story that we ran away for whatever reasons. People would believe that and we would disappear. And that seemed like a horrible idea. After we had talked about it, I agreed completely that it was the worst idea and we should stay in the house, where it might be more difficult to just kill us without anyone knowing. And we would at least know where they are. And maybe they would never do it. That was another thing we talked about. And that I hoped.
That maybe it wouldn't happen?
Right.
Did you talk about what to do in terms of staying in the house and making sure that you were safe?
We talked about, I think I was the one that said that we weren't just going to stay around waiting to die. We were going to try and get some ways of defending ourselves and protection. And Erik mentioned the guns that we knew were in the house, and I figured there were probably more in the house. And dismissed that as a bad idea. They might notice they were missing and so on. So we just decided that we would buy our own the next day.
The next day was Friday.
Right.
Is that correct? And did Erik spend the night in the guest house again, if you remember, or in the main house?
On Thursday night,
Yes.
he stayed with me, and he stayed on the couch.
And Friday morning, when you got up, was Erik doing something?
Yeah, he was playing tennis. Well, he was practicing a serve or whatever.
And did you go out and talk to him about what you had talked about the night before?
Yes.
And what was that conversation?
That was basically me explaining to Erik that he had to realize how serious the situation was. And, I didn't know. He seemed to be trying to pretend it wasn't happening. And, I was feeling very unsafe, sort of lost and, distant from my dad, and scared. And I was sort of relying on my little brother to some extent. And now he was pretending things were not happening, basically. And I told him, we decided we were going to go and get some guns to protect ourselves. And, this was serious. And that just because it was a new day and you want it to go away doesn't make it go away. And I talked to him for quite a while about that and what did he want to do. And he agreed that he mentioned something about that it would also be bad if, that he didn't want Dad to know he wasn't practicing, and that could start a confrontation that could come to a head too, and something about that. But basically he was just pretending it wasn't happening. And so after I talked to him, he agreed we had to go get some guns like we had planned. And
Did you go to get guns?
we did.
And did you go somewhere in Los Angeles or somewhere else?
We went to the Big Five,
Where? Which city are we in?
Santa Monica.
And
Monica.
what did you try to buy at the Big Five in Santa Monica?
We went to buy handguns that we could carry around, and weren't able to do that.
Why not?
Well, we went there and we inquired about the handguns, and I don't remember that Big Five as well. But basically, we were in the process of trying to pick a handgun and buy one, and then we were told that we weren't going to be able to leave the store with them, that it took 2 weeks, a waiting period where they would have to check our credentials, and they do this mandatory check. We'd have to wait 2 weeks and come back. And so that was, we hadn't known that. And we just he told us the only thing you can buy over the counter is rifles, shotguns, So we just left pretty much confused.
Why wasn't it going to be good enough to get them in 2 weeks?
Well, clearly we could not wait 2 weeks, and that I really felt that my dad was going to act, that either he would act very quickly or my mom would make something happen fast. We weren't going to have a lot of time because I did feel my dad thought I was going to tell people. But in any case, we would never have waited. We wanted to get the protection right away.
And they told you that you could buy shotguns or rifles at that store. Is that
Right.
correct? But you didn't buy them there?
Well, we didn't want to buy shotguns and rifles. We wanted handguns, and because we wanted them to walk around the house with. And so we didn't know what to do at that point, and we just got back in Erik's car and started driving and thinking about what we could do at that point.
And where did you drive to?
We drove south down into toward the La Jolla area where I had been a couple times for tennis and so on. And one of my cousins used to go to school there.
And as you were driving down there, did you and Erik talk?
Yes.
And what did you talk about?
He started to tell me, I just felt I felt bad from Tuesday.
What do you mean you felt bad for Tuesday?
Well, I was very harsh with him Tuesday. He was clearly telling me something that was, just killing him as far as telling me. And I was, basically the statement, did you like it, was was bothering me that I had said that. And so I started asking him more about what had actually happened with my dad and say it was okay to talk about it. And we started to talk about that, although it was very hard for me to listen to. I talked to him about it.
Why was it hard for you to listen to?
For lots of reasons. Obviously I thought about my own situation, which seemed to be different than his, actually, but still brought back those memories and thinking about Dad and just visualizing what Erik was telling me was making me ill. And I didn't want to say, let's not talk about it. I don't want to hear it. And for him, it was like he wanted to get it out. And it was a very uncomfortable period of time. And then he started telling me, then I realizing how sick it was. It was very different from what happened with me. It was very much forceful. That came later after the conversation. But first he was telling me just about some of the things that would happen. And they were very sick things. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I wonder what my mom is thinking, knowing that this information could be out there and what my dad's thinking, something that they had discussed, what we could say to people. And that really made me very nervous that I really didn't realize, I didn't realize till he started talking about it, how, how bad it was, that how scared my dad might have been that this would get out. And it was more than just he fondled his son or something like that. I mean, this was very sick. And he started, and it was forceful. And he was telling me, he started telling me then about the threats that my father had made against him throughout all those years.
Is it being offered from the truth of the matter asserted or just the state of mind of the
It's offered for
witness?
State of mind, Your Honor.
All right, it'll be received for that limited purpose.
Basically, he started telling me that my dad had one of the reasons he had never told me before was because my dad had always threatened his life and essentially used me against him, saying that if he ever told me, he would kill me and that Erik would be responsible for my death, and threatened him in other ways, physically and my brother had just done a lot of it in just fear constantly. And so that disturbed me a great deal, and actually made me angry with him again, because
Angry with whom?
Erik.
Why?
Because, well, this was the first I was hearing of this, and on Tuesday he could have told me these things, and I felt like, I told him, if he told me these things on Tuesday, maybe we would have done something different. I
What do you
wouldn't.
mean, would have done something different?
Well, I certainly would not have just brought up. I would not have had the conversation on Thursday that way, because
Conversation with your father? you
right
mean?
with my father.
Why?
Well, the whole point of going Thursday was the idea that he was just going to we had all the cards, and obviously Erik knew that we didn't, that my dad was willing to kill over it, and which is something that I probably should have figured out on my own, but I just didn't think about it. Erik had never said anything, and we just sort of went in this fantasy state that it was going to be great. And I think if I had gone back, and I told him Friday that in an angry way that, we could have just never said anything and tried to figure out another way to get you out of the house. Could have just said that you couldn't take it anymore for some other reason and you had to leave, or just something like that. And if my dad didn't think anybody knew about what was happening to him, maybe he would let Erik go for other reasons. So anyway, it was a bad conversation, and he started crying that I was getting upset with him, and I felt guilty again. Basically, we just, I told him, okay, now we know this, and that's good. And at that point, we thought we should definitely try to get some guns.
Did this change the way you thought of your dad? After hearing this information?
Thursday changed the way I thought of my dad.
You mean the talk?
The talk and what happened to my brother afterwards, and in fact Tuesday changed the way I thought of him. But Thursday, him basically threatening my life, going to that extent, really confused me. I was sort of, my whole world was upside down for it, and my dad was like a stranger, almost, in a sense, and I was struggling with that because he and I had a very close connection, and I was not wanting to believe that he would kill me over my brother, and I think he was probably wrestling with the same thing, like, why was I going to throw it all away just for Erik and ruin him? And so I was wrestling with these things in my mind, but mostly I felt like, this guy is more violent, dangerous than I knew, and that if he could do this to my brother, he could do anything.
Did you end up in a gun store in San Diego?
Yes, we decided we would go ahead and buy shotguns, and then we felt that if we were going to get attacked, it would be at night, more likely, and so we felt we should buy them, and we went ahead and tried to do that.
And what happened?
Well, we went to a smaller gun store, and there was an older man behind the counter, and they were asking lots of questions. And at some point, we had kind of decided on what we wanted to buy. And he was very much into the whole shotgun thing and telling us that it was a great weapon for house protection, and that's what we told him we wanted for. And so at some point, we got ready to actually buy the guns. He asked if we had California ID.
Did you have a California driver's license?
No, neither of us. No, I didn't have one.
They're not. I have an exhibit that I've marked as 246. It's 2 pages. It's a document from the Department of Motor Vehicle, order of suspension of license.
Yes.
Showing you what we've marked as 246. You recognize what that is?
Yes.
And what is it?
This is I saw a similar form. I don't know if I saw this one, but at my Aunt Terry's house about my license being suspended in May and having to turn my license in
May of what year?
89,
And what state is that from?
California.
Did you lose your license because of too many tickets?
Yes.
A little leading.
And you said you saw a letter like that at your Aunt Terry's?
Yeah, my mom had mailed it to Aunt Terry, and she had explained to me that I had to mail my license back, and she gave me the form to read, and my mom was telling me that they were going to charge me with the misdemeanor or whatever it is, whatever it says here. I could read it, but if I didn't mail it back, so I mailed it back.
Who did you mail it to?
My mother. And I had my New Jersey one. I had 2 licenses, and so I used the New Jersey one.
When you say you had 2 licenses, you mean when you had the California license, you had both California and New Jersey?
Right.
So you mailed the
Well, typically what happens is when you move to a new state, generally the new state is going to ask for your old license and then they're going to destroy it for you. That's at least what they did for me when I moved to DC and my California license was going to expire. So I had to get one in DC and they destroyed my California one so that I wouldn't have 2 licenses at the same time. That's generally what happens. I don't know if that's something that, I mean, granted, I did that in like 2019. So, this is the late 80s or early 90s when that happened. Okay, fair. maybe he said that he lost it, but he hadn't. That's entirely possible. I mean, Lyle was not exactly a shining example of someone who was the most responsible young adult, especially when it came to like administrative matters. But typically you're not supposed to have licenses for two states at the same time. Yeah, just pointing that out.
the California license back to your mom?
Yes.
So when the man at the gun store asked for a California driver's license, did you have one?
No.
Did Erik have one?
No.
Did he have someone else's?
Yes, he had Donovan's.
And did you then buy the guns at that store?
No, we were going to buy the guns at that store, but when he asked for ID, we kind of were taken back by that. We didn't know that we had to show ID at all for these guns, and I just felt that it was. I talked to my brother a little bit out of this hearing, and we just felt that we should go outside and talk about the ID thing, obviously. And so we had that conversation first, and then we decided there that the whole thing was so awkward in the store with the guy that we had better not buy the guns at his store.
Did you go to another store
Yes.
in San Diego?
Yes, I think so.
Was it a Big Five?
Yes.
And did you buy 2 shotguns there?
Yes.
And what did you use for identification there?
He used Donovan's license and signed for it, and we bought them.
And did anybody at the store show you how the guns work?
Before he answers that, I was almost expecting him to say that they were worried that like his father would somehow track their IDs or something, and that's why they used Donovan Goudreau's license. I don't know why I was thinking that, but because it's like everything, all of their transactions and everything were like so traceable, right? Because if they were using their father's credit cards for basically everything. I can't remember if they detailed before how they paid for it. maybe maybe she'll ask him. But I know at some point we've already heard from folks at Big Five, and they went through the transaction, details that were on there. So anyway, that was just interesting.
Tell you about them?
I don't think so. They might have. And I think the lady showed us just the very basics of it, where the ammunition goes and just that whole thing. But she didn't have any like shells there or anything. I mean, she didn't really, there was no way to demonstrate it. And there was no, there was no way to show us. But I mean, she did some kind of explanation. But I was mostly wandering around the store, allowing Erik to complete the purchase. It was a long thing. She had a form with different stuff. And we had found out of a phone book, we felt that maybe it should have a local address, since Donovan's address was San Francisco or something up north. And we didn't know if there were going to be further restrictions, like you had to be in that city. We just didn't know the rules. We kept finding out as we went along. So he did the whole form, and it didn't seem to be any problem. And I got a box of ammunition. And
where'd you get the box of ammunition?
They had a stack of boxes stacked up in the middle of the place. And I took 1 or 2 boxes, I don't remember, and purchased them separately. Just went in the line myself and bought them.
Then did you drive back that evening?
Yes.
And what happened when you got home?
We got home, and my mother came down right away and told us about the fishing trip.
What do you mean told you about the fishing trip?
She told us that the time had been changed from some point in the middle of the day to later in the afternoon. I remember the times, and that we were expected to go on the trip. And my brother kind of said something, and I said, well, we don't, they had mentioned this trip to us before, and we had said we weren't going to go. And
did the time change have any significance for you?
The time change had a significance. I didn't really know what the original time was, but she was saying it was changed for some reason. And also the fact that it was in the middle of the day seemed strange to me as a time to go shark fishing. And I didn't believe the whole thing. I thought the fishing trip was the way that my dad had designed to take care of us, kill us. And because originally the idea was that he had lied to this executive guy that he was a deep sea fisherman and he had to do a quick practice session. And that's how this whole thing arose. And he had not expected us to necessarily go with him, because I was going to practice tennis and we had a tournament coming up. And he wouldn't have expected me to take 5 hours doing this, but he had to. And now he wanted us along with him. And so we gave my mom a hard time about it. And she said, well, if you don't want to go, you can go up and talk to your dad. And she was very cold about it. And we didn't want to do that. So we just said, oh, we'll go.
Why didn't you want to go talk to your dad about not wanting to go?
Probably should have, but I just didn't want to have a conversation with my dad after Thursday unless he initiated.
Okay. So she's told you about the time change. Was this a pleasant conversation with her, or?
No, she was, seemed like she was reporting. It was like she was sent downstairs to tell us. It was like a message.
Why did she come downstairs?
Because we had come in the door. And in our house, the door was, it was very noisy. You could hear it close, very loud. And so she came downstairs and gave us that message. And my mom always spoke as if it was my father speaking. Your father says do this. Your father wants this. Your father thinks this. So that was the kind of conversation it was. But she was she seemed very cold about it. And I couldn't even believe that she would think that I would agree to go on the trip, because it just seemed so completely out of, we had this major crisis in the family, and she was wanting me to go on a fishing trip.
Had you talked to your dad at all on Friday?
No,
Did you see him at all on Friday?
no.
After you had the conversation with your mom about the fishing trip, what did you do?
My brother and I talked about the trip, and basically felt that we clearly could not bring shotguns aboard the boat. And we basically didn't know what to do. What could we do? So we just decided that we would try and be away and sort of be late and miss it.
How did you feel about the idea of going on the fishing trip? Was this just something that didn't sound like a good time, or did you view
No, we thought that this was how they were going to kill us, and we couldn't be positive, but we were pretty feeling pretty sure, although it had been planned in advance. So
Yeah, this definitely gives some context for the fishing boat captain, right? Do you remember that guy from like forever ago? He was like one of the first witnesses that we saw. And I just remember feeling like, why are we listening to this testimony? Like, why is this person here? Now we understand, at least from a defense perspective. I mean, this was like one of the last things that they did as a family, and it happened after this massive blow up. And I can also understand why, if the brothers felt that they were at risk of losing their lives by their parents, going on a fishing boat out of San Pedro does not sound like the best place to be, right? It sounds like a very vulnerable place to be. Like that's kind of like, I feel like that's something that you could very easily picture from any kind of a mafia movie, right? Like where things end up in a not so great place. So yeah, it doesn't take too much imagination to understand why why that was a nerve-wracking sort of trip to be on by the brothers, from this perspective. Got a couple questions here, and I'm so sorry if I missed some earlier. But Jan wants to know, do you have to have an international driving license for driving where you are, as you are overseas for a while? It depends on the country. Some countries require it, some countries do not. Some definitely they want it. And for anybody that doesn't know what an international driver's license is, there are places that you can go if you have a valid driver's license, at least from the United States. This is what I know. I can't speak to other countries where, you're coming from another country that has a driver's license, or you have a driver's license from another country, I should say. Coming from the United States, I think it's like you can get one through AAA. I believe that's like one of the places that you can get it through. There are other places that you can get it. But basically it's just like a secondary kind of administrative thing that, for whatever reason, it's recognized in some countries as a way of checking that you have a valid driver's license. Other countries don't really care. They say, all right, cool, you have a driver's license from somewhere, and therefore you're able to. Some countries are going to be more strict or more relaxed on standards for driving, just like they are on all kinds of things, as you can imagine. So it kind of depends on where you go. Dater says, can you summarize what has happened between the scene with the mom and the hairpiece? And now I'm wondering if I have the timeline correct. So there's a scene where, she gets in the screaming match with Lyle. She rips off his hairpiece, which is like tightly secured with glue and stuff, on his scalp. Then not long after that, as he's sort of like trying to fix things up, after that, Erik comes in, he sort of opens up to Lyle about this whole thing that happened. And I think it's I'm not sure if I have the exact timing correct, but I think it's like the next day that Lyle decides to have the conversation, first with their mom, and then I guess later that night their dad, or the next day after that. I'm not exactly sure, but basically not much time seems to have passed between each of these things. And then, dad comes in later than expected because his flight was supposedly delayed. And then he comes in, and then, he goes upstairs, talks to Kitty, comes downstairs. They have this whole other conversation. The next day is when they decide to start looking for firearms, because according to Lyle's testimony, they fear for their lives because they think that, they think that, Jose is under the impression that they truly are going to go and tell people. And that's a very, very vulnerable place for actually them to be in, because, he cares about image first. From all of the testimony that we've heard so far, I do believe that they believe that. And this really, one thing to really note here is that what's most important with all of this is not even necessarily whether we believe that Jose would have killed them, or that Kitty would have killed them, or, that they would have arranged for someone else to kill the brothers. What is most important is whether we believe that the brothers believe that, right? Like, does it seem like it makes sense for them to believe that, considering all of their testimony and considering everything that we have heard so far from other witnesses? That is important here, because, we're talking about state of mind. Is this murder, or is this something less than that? And if they have a bona fide belief that their life is in danger, and regardless of the timing of it, if it is, because of the breadth and the depth of the power of the parents over not just their lives, but the lives of everyone else in their social network, it becomes a much more plausible sort of thing to think of, that, they were encouraged not to have friends. They were not allowed to have friends. The one time that Lyle brought a friend to his father, as sort of like, someone that he's like, this is someone that I hope that you will approve of. He did not approve of him. And that friend was not around for much longer after that. Same thing happened with like girlfriends. If Jose did not approve, girlfriend was not around for very long. Family members that they trusted even were still talking with Jose and Kitty and getting advice from Jose and Kitty, and giving all of this information, to them. So it becomes much more plausible the more that they sort of elaborate, but always have to keep an open mind, and going into cross-examination, like how much will this be tested? How much will this be properly tested? That's another question. So, okay. All right. Let's continue.
We really couldn't be positive, and wasn't sure how I felt about it, as far as whether I would, say that we just weren't going, and demand that we weren't, say we weren't going if the time came, or what. And, we didn't think that there was anything we really could do. Again, we didn't want to bring it to a head with my dad. I didn't want to let him know that I wasn't, that I was going to cause problems. I was trying to be low key. And
Were you
wait.
feeling low key at that time?
No, that was one of a bad night. We wanted to stay he wanted to stay with me in my guest house, and I told him, no, that's going to look bad. Just stay in your guest house, and let's try to make it seem like.
You said stay in your guest house.
I mean, you stay in your room, and I'll stay in the guest house, and we'll try to make it seem like there's nothing, we're not that concerned about the fishing trip, and maybe we can find a way to just miss it.
Why did you want to look like you weren't concerned about it? What did you think was how was that going to help?
At this point, my brother, it's easier to explain it because in the morning, the next day, my brother was just so afraid, thinking that they were going to kill us at any moment, that he was going to die, they're going to kill us. And I felt less and less in control of my own situation with regards to it, and feeling like Erik was going to do something, say something, and that was going to bring it to a confrontation, or they were I just felt like if we brought it to a head, my dad was going to say, if he hadn't made the decision, he was going to say, we have to do it. If he was wavering, and I was hoping that he was wavering, maybe.
Wavering about what decision?
About whether he could allow us to go on with this information, go on living. And I felt like I didn't know how much time it would take my dad to arrange something if he had decided. I didn't know if he had decided. If he hadn't decided, I told my brother, I don't want to give them the indication that we're so out of control that we're likely to just not think and go tell the police or run off and do some of the things I had threatened. I was hoping to give my dad the idea that maybe I had changed my mind or something like that, although I wasn't going to go to him and say that.
Why couldn't you go to him and say that?
Just based on who he was, and that that was just play right into their hands. I felt that I would go and I would say, Dad, I changed my mind. What I would have to do was say I'm going to abandon my brother. So I was never going to do that. But if I wanted to do it to buy time, my dad's likely answer is, great, I'm glad you changed your mind, and kill him anyway. And so it just, unless my dad initiated the conversation, and then maybe I could think he was sincere, I wasn't just going to go to him and then have him lie to me. And as he had said that, that's what he would do in that Chinese Revolution thing. And
What do you mean?
the Chinese revolt, where the students were revolting, I remember my dad saying that the Chinese leaders were screwing up with the tanks and so on, and they should just acquiesce, give in to the demands, let it calm down, and assassinate all the student leaders, and the problem would go away. And instead, they were causing this big national scene on TV. And that's the way my dad thought. Didn't like messy problems, like things simple. And so that's one of the reasons, basically the reason I didn't want to initiate a conversation myself, although we were very much hoping that they would do something.
All right, let's take a recess, ladies and gentlemen. We'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour.
In his room, and I slept where I was, and we had just decided that more than likely, if something was going to happen, it was going to be at night. That's just what we felt. And that was certainly the only real purpose for having the shotguns was for the night, and that's what we were most worried about. And so we just stayed up as long as we could while still getting some sleep. And we figured after a certain time, then we were probably safe for the evening. So that's why I didn't sleep. Didn't get much sleep.
Did you have the gun in your room that night?
Yes.
Was it loaded?
Yes, I kept it in my bed, loaded every night.
When you got up the next day, did you see your dad in the morning on Saturday?
No, I didn't see him until we came back.
Did you and your brother go somewhere on Saturday morning?
Yes, we left the house sometime in the morning. and we drove. We had talked about the night before that being a little. I had bought the shells separately from Erik, and there was some conversation about it, the concern for whether those shells would actually work in the gun, because I don't know anything about guns, and so we just wanted. It seemed like they fit, but we wanted to make sure. So Erik found a place in the phone book that I guess seemed like there was a lot of different kinds of ammunition and so on, and so we drove out there.
Where was it? Do you remember?
In Van Nuys.
And did you go to the gun store?
Yes.
And what did you do when you were there?
We asked the guy. We told him the kind of gun that we had, and I told him the kind of shells that I had bought, and just asked him a bunch of questions about what he recommended and for protection and so on. And he was also extremely knowledgeable person, and just going on and on about the different kinds of ammunition, and eventually recommended a certain kind, and we bought that.
Did you stay away from home most of the day? Or did you?
We stayed away from home so that we could miss the trip, and which was most of the day. In fact, it was pretty much all day. And we got back like sometime around 4 o'clock, I think. Not exactly sure, but late.
What time were you supposed to be back to go on the trip?
At 3, I believe.
So were you intentionally late?
Yes, we were intentionally late, and I didn't want to be too late, but I wanted to be late enough to miss the trip. And I knew that my dad had arranged this trip, and he had to do it, assuming he wanted to. Something unusual wasn't planned, and so we showed up, and they were still there.
When you said you didn't want to be too late, why didn't you want to be too late?
Again, I didn't want to get my dad to think that we were purposely avoiding the trip, and then have him think something strange was going on with us.
When you got back to the house, had they left already?
No, they were still there.
How did you feel when you saw that?
I knew it when I pulled in because the cars were still there, and I just kind of pulled in anyway. And I believe my mom immediately came out of the house upset that we were late and let's go, and basically went right back in the house, and they had things arranged, whatever they were going to take. And it was just like a whirlwind of activity, and I never had a real chance to talk to my brother about maybe we shouldn't go or what. Next thing I knew, we were heading for their car to go. Mom was putting everything in Dad's car, and we had some discussion about taking 2 cars.
Who wanted to take 2 cars?
I wanted to take 2 cars.
Why?
Just thought it was safer to take 2 cars. And Dad was insistent that we take the 1 car. And
Did you sometimes take 2 cars when the whole family was going to the same place?
sometimes we took 2 cars, sometimes we took 1 car. Well, neither would be real unusual. But I, again, didn't want to have a problem with him, so I just said fine, and we sat in the back. And
What did you think was going to happen on the fishing trip?
we felt that the fishing trip was arranged to kill us in a way that nobody could know.
Why did you go?
We shouldn't have gone, but I don't really know why we went. We didn't know what else to do. And it was just a constant thing with me that I did not want to give my dad the impression that I was going to go tell people like I had given him impression before, apparently. At least that's what he thought. And so I basically just went along with the things he insisted on. And so I went. We just hoped nothing would happen. Hope we were wrong.
When you got to the fishing boat, what happened then?
We got to the marina, which I don't believe I'd ever been to before, at least not that area. And there was this sort of scruffy kind of, I guess it was a boat captain guy hanging out in the dock, and my dad ran up to him and they started talking. And then my mom got the stuff out of the back and we followed her toward the dock. And then we got over to the boat, which was very different than I expected. And both my brother and I the whole thing was very strange, and it made us even more nervous.
What was very strange?
Just the boat was a very small wooden boat, and we had expected, we had been deep sea fishing before in Florida, and they were always, big. I'm not sure what boats are made out of, but like big white yacht type boats and this was a very small wooden boat with just one little section in the middle. It just didn't seem like the kind of thing that my father would rent to do his deep sea fishing. So I could tell my brother was real nervous, and I just didn't say anything about it. Commented on the size of the boat, something like that, and the captain said something. He seemed all right, the guy, but I figured he was either working for my dad or he wasn't. And so we got on, and we left.
And where did you spend your time on that trip?
We definitely stayed away from my parents just felt, it sounds stupid, but we felt that at the very least we could jump off if we saw something unusual was going on. And we just tried to do it in a way that didn't look like it was obvious, but that it was difficult for them to get to us. And luckily the boat was designed in a way that you really couldn't get around the side to the front easily. You almost fell off. You had to swing yourself around almost. So we just stayed up there.
Up there being?
In the front of the boat. And my dad stayed in the back with the captain guy, and my mom was back there.
Was your mom in the back with your dad the whole time, or was she?
No, Mom was mostly in the middle section inside, and I wasn't sure what she was doing inside, but she was in there.
Was the front of the boat a comfortable place to be?
No, I felt it seemed like you weren't supposed to be in the front of the boat, and which is why we liked being up there, because it was very hard to get to, but it wasn't designed for people to hang out there. And it was a very cold, windy, choppy waters, and the boat sort of bounced along and water would come up, and it was extremely uncomfortable and freezing, which was, I was wondering if my dad was going to wonder why we were staying up there when it was clearly freezing and uncomfortable. But we stayed anyway.
Did you get wet?
Yes.
Did you stay up there through the whole trip?
Basically the whole trip. We came back when my dad caught the sharks.
Why'd you go back when your dad caught the sharks?
He told us to come back, and I couldn't refuse. They had caught a shark, and so it seemed like legitimate. So we went back, and there was a little shark, and so we did whatever we did with that with Dad and the captain, and I think that's pretty much the only time we went back. My brother might have gone back for something else, maybe to use the restroom or something, but I don't remember.
When you went back,
By the way, Sandy, member for 12 months. Thanks so much for being a YouTube member, a member of Bite Club for over a year. Saying don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you so much for that reminder. Very, very kind. And thanks again for being a member.
Back when your dad caught the shark, was the boat captain there?
Yes.
Was your mom there?
Yes.
Were you afraid when you went back?
I was afraid the whole trip, but I wasn't particularly afraid about it's, we had caught a shark, and so I wasn't necessarily thinking that there was something going on. But we definitely didn't want to go back, but there was just nothing we could do. My dad said, come on, boys, help with the shark. We were going to have to come.
What time did you get back from the fishing trip?
I got back around somewhere around midnight.
And what did you do then?
And my brother and my dad, I think they went in the house upstairs somewhere, and my brother and I managed to leave in his car and go over to UCLA.
And what did you go over to UCLA for?
We just wanted to talk, and we had not had a chance to talk really privately except on the boat, and we had no idea what was going to happen on the boat. So we just kind of really hadn't had a chance to talk at all, and mostly wanted to talk about the fact that nothing happened on the boat. And
Did you think that meant maybe nothing was going to happen?
Yes, I was relieved that nothing happened on the boat. I felt less sure that they were going to do something. And although the whole thing was very...
Which that is not exactly helpful for the defense here. For him to say, I felt less sure that something was going to happen, because for the defense to have the strongest case, basically, at the very least, at the time at which they bought the guns, which we've now covered, and then at the time, which was before the fishing trip, and then at the time that they actually used the guns, they have to be pretty positive that their parents are going to do something to them, to harm them at the very least, right? Probably unalive them. So him saying that as a result of the fishing trip, that it was this very tense sort of fishing trip where they thought that something was going to happen to them, nothing happened to them, and then he felt less sure that they were going to do something to them. So I don't know, maybe something will change between the fishing trip and when they actually, killed their parents, that throws that back out the window. But that's a point that's not exactly great for the defense here.
strange. And so we went to UCLA in the stadium field, and we hung out there and talked. We had a pretty long discussion.
And did both of you, when you were talking, did both of you seem to have the same feeling that maybe things were going to be okay, or were you still
no.
concerned?
Erik was still, I don't think my brother was feeling better about the fishing trip too much. It was obvious that nothing had happened on the fishing trip, but he didn't take that to mean anything. Maybe they had just felt we were too much in the front of the boat or something. He wasn't sure. And so we had a conversation about staying apart the next day and just sort of going one day at a time, and that I would stay home and maybe they would have a conversation with me or something, or initiate something, and I would allow that opportunity and just hang out at home. And he wanted to be out of the house, he would be out, and then he would check in occasionally. And we talked about some other things also.
When you returned home, did you see either of your parents?
Yes.
Who did you see?
Well, we came home and the door was locked. And I tried to, I checked all the other doors and they were all locked. So I figured, they had been locked on purpose, and we should ring the doorbell rather than just go over to my guest house and sleep there.
What do you mean you thought they'd been locked on purpose?
Well, the door had not been locked up to that point. So they had been locked, and so I figured they were locked on purpose.
So what time was this about? Do you know?
It was very late. I don't remember exactly what time.
Did you wear a watch at that time?
No.
So you rang the doorbell,
Yes.
and what happened?
Nothing happened actually for quite a while, and then eventually my mother came down, and she came storming down and opened the door and immediately started yelling.
What was she yelling about?
The fact that it was late and we were ringing the doorbell and waking her up, and just stuff like that we just, I made a comment that if, she would give us a key instead of, we would be able to get in the house. And she kept the keys. She liked all the keys and copies of the keys kept in this little drawer in the foyer. And, you could take a key and you could return it, but you couldn't just have your own key. And so I always was forgetting. And so whenever she did lock the door, since they were usually not locked, I was usually locked out. So I said that to her, and she just was furious, and she said a lot of the things that she usually does when she's furious.
What things did she say?
Did she say? That she hated us, that, we're nothing but a problem in her life, and also that she wished that I was never born. And that's when my brother said something in my defense, and she turned on him. And that's when she made the statement that if he had kept his mouth shut, things might have worked out in this family.
Ooh.
And she said it very, in a fury. And as soon as she said that, she said some more stuff afterwards, and I told her, okay, Mom, sorry, and just basically let her win the argument and just, burn out. And she ran upstairs. And my brother and I stepped outside and had a talk by the cars about this statement.
About which statement?
The one my mom had made. As soon as she made it, my brother and I both felt that she had basically given away what they were doing.
Which statement in particular are you referring to?
The fact that if he had kept his mouth, she was referring to what he had told me, and that things would have worked out in the family.
Did you two talk
Similar to what she said Thursday, but it was kind of different.
Did you two talk about what that meant?
Yes.
And what was that conversation between the two of you?
Basically, just that she had given away, something was going to happen. Something was planned. And, she hadn't given away how or when, but that they had made the decision. We felt that they had made it. And that my mother, and I figured my mother, if someone was going to give it away, it was going to be my mother. And we felt that she had.
So the statement was to Erik, if you had kept your mouth shut, this family would have worked out? That
If
statement.
you had kept your mouth shut, things would have worked out in this family.
Did you, after that conversation with your brother, did you go back and sleep in the guest house that night?
Yes.
And where did your brother sleep?
He slept in his room.
And did anything else happen that night?
No.
Next morning, did you see your brother when you got up?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
What did you do all day Sunday?
Well, I hadn't done anything. I had stayed up late again, and I did go to sleep, and I woke up some point in the morning, and I kind of just woke up and went outside to sort of see what was going on. And then I decided not to go into the main house. I stayed in my house. And at some point, my brother showed up mid-afternoon, I believe.
Did you
In the mid-afternoon, around then.
did you make a call to Perry Berman at some point that day?
Yeah, I had called him before my brother had arrived to see if he could go out that night, because that was part of my discussions with my brother, which was that we would try to have as many plans in the evening, especially with other people, as possible, because it was just safer. And then during the days, try to be apart or not there. And so, I called Perry. And
Did you get to talk to him, or?
No, I left a message.
And during the rest of you said your brother checked back in with you at one point during the day?
Yes, around the middle of the day.
What was the purpose of that, of having him check
Well,
back?
we had arranged for him to check in, so I knew he would be at some point. And he didn't want to call in case Mom answered the phone at that point. So he just arrived, and I don't remember exactly, but he might have come into my guest house. But we had a conversation at that point about what had happened to him the night before.
And what had happened to him the night before?
He had had a confrontation with my dad.
Had you heard it the night before, or was this the first you heard?
This is the first I had heard of it. No, that's not the first I've heard of it. I'm confused. He told me in the morning, before he left, we had this conversation. And then he came back in the midday to check on me again. That's the way it happened. Because my dad had tried to get into his room the night before, he said, and had been pounding.
This state of mind again, Your Honor.
All right, this is not being received for the truth of what was said, just to reflect the state of mind of the witness here.
So Erik told you that
He
your
told me
dad
that-
had tried to get into his room.
Right. And he had the door locked, and he told me the whole thing where he was sitting on the bed and he had the gun there, and my dad was pounding on the door and demanding that he open it, and he wasn't going to open it. And, he was trembling, and he wasn't sure if he was going to shoot Dad through the door or what was going to happen, and that they basically almost had this whole thing happen without me even knowing. And he thought Dad was going to burst in, and he didn't. And he was pretty, really worked up telling me this whole thing that had happened, and I just couldn't believe it. I believed it, but I just was just amazed. And
How did it make you feel when you heard about this?
I couldn't really have been more nervous than I was already after what my mother had said. It was just added to it, just a feeling that obviously that night was going to be a problem, since I'm sure my dad was going to come back, and that my brother should stay away from the house.
Did you go into the house at all on Sunday?
Yes.
And did you see your parents at all on Sunday
Yes.
during the day?
They were watching tennis.
And did you have any conversations with them?
Just briefly. I went in and I said, I decided that I would go in and try to just sort of say hello and just see what the atmosphere was like. And I went in and I said hello, and they didn't answer me. And I just kind of stood there, and they were watching TV. And then I went into the kitchen, and was kind of shooken up by that.
Was that unusual for you to speak to them and them to not answer?
Not for my mom, but for my dad, it would be unusual. And so I went back in again to try and get a conversation of just small talk going, just say hello or whatever. And I sat down to watch TV also in the other chair.
What were they watching on TV?
U.S. Open. Or not the U.S. Open, the warm-up for the U.S. Open. Whatever. They're watching the top pro tennis tour. I believe it was the tournament before. I don't remember the name. And I think it was, I'd be guessing, but I think it was Brad Gilbert, but I'm not sure.
They were watching tennis?
Yes.
Okay. So you said you walked back in and sat down?
I walked in and I sat down on the little, like at the love seat thing, the other couch. And at some point, I tried to talk to my dad again and asked him about if he had the number to that unarmed arbitrage camp in Marina Del Rey.
Why did you ask him about that?
Just to get a response. It was just sort of unbearable not to have them say anything at all, and I was feeling like a ghost, like we were already dead. And so I just wanted to talk. And so he had in the past been kind of bugging me to try that camp, and I had not gone to that camp. And so I asked for the number this time, and he said, "What does it matter anymore?"
Ooh.
And when he said that, and I just felt there was a problem.
Why, when he said, what did you say? Why it doesn't matter anymore? Is that what he said?
And I said, "What does it matter anymore?"
What does it matter anymore? Why did that have any meaning to you?
Yes, I felt that, well, I could have a lot of meanings, but it just clearly had something to do with the crisis and the Thursday conversation and what had been happening in the house.
What did it mean to you? How did you take that?
I took it to be just my dad's sarcastic way of saying, "You're dead. You're not going to be around to be going to unarmed arbitrage camps." And that's the way I took it.
Did you stay there after that?
No, I left. I stayed around for a short period of time and then eventually just left and went back to actually sat in the patio furniture area.
Did you have a phone conversation with Perry Berman after that?
Yes.
About when was that?
Sometime in the late afternoon.
You said your brother had checked in at one point in time during the day. Is that correct?
Right.
Was that before or after the conversations you've just told us about with your
Before.
parents? When you talked to Mr. Berman, did you call him or did he call you?
He called me, and I don't know. I don't know if he called me, actually. I might have called him.
All right. So you had a phone conversation with him.
Right.
And was there anything unusual about that conversation?
No, except that, there was something unusual, which was that my dad had lied. He had called at some point after I had left a message.
Who had called?
Perry had called, returning my message, and my dad had lied and said that I was out and that I couldn't do anything that night. Perry had been returning my message about doing something that night. And
your dad had told him that you were out?
Right.
Were you home all day?
Yes.
So did the fact that your dad had told him that you were out when you were home have any meaning for you?
Oh, yes. It had a great meaning.
What did it mean to you?
I felt that something was going to happen that night, and he wanted me home.
So when you talked to Perry, did you make any plans with him?
Yes. I planned to he wanted to go. He was going out to dinner with a friend of his, and then he was going over to something called a Taste of LA. And then he wanted me to come with him. I wasn't going to leave without my brother. And I basically told him my brother wasn't home and I was waiting for Erik, and I would meet him at the Taste of LA at least after dinner.
And did you and your brother have plans for that evening? Had you talked about what you were going to do that evening?
Yes. Well, we were going to go to the movies.
So did you wait for your brother to arrive?
Yes.
And when did he get back? If you know. Do you know what time it was?
It was late.
And when Erik came back, did you talk to him about what had happened that day?
Yes. We had a real quick conversation.
What'd you tell him?
I told him what had happened earlier in the day with my dad and mom not talking to me, and what dad had said about the tennis camp. And I told him about dad lying about me being home to Perry, and that we had to get out of the house.
How were you feeling at that time?
I was, the fear was growing, and it just sort of was getting out of control for me. And I was feeling very like crumbling. And the night before, after my mom had said that, I felt like things were sort of, I was not in control. I was sort of slipping away, and I was trying to be, I was trying to help my brother by being not as hysterical as he was and trying to say that things were going to be all right. And I was losing that. And especially since my dad lied about me being home, I felt that something was going to happen Sunday, and I was scared. I wanted to get out of the house.
So did you tell your parents you were going to leave?
Yes.
Where was this, that this conversation took place?
I went in the house and wanted to tell my mom that we were leaving. And she told me that we couldn't go and to stay there in the house and not go out. And I told her why, and I was supposed to meet someone at the movies, and that I was late and that we had to leave, and she just had no answer. She was just sort of confused, and I don't think she had expected that I was going out.
Was it unusual that your parents would tell you you couldn't go out on a Sunday evening like that?
Yes, it would be unusual.
And by the way, I'm just going to interrupt really quick here because I wanted to thank Sandy for gifting 10 Legal Bites memberships. Thank you so much, Sandy. It's so incredibly generous of you to donate once again. I always say donate, gift once again to other people in the chat. So DS, Mindy, Roxana, Andrea Nagy, Diane M, Jessica Crago, What If Jenny, and APOC 6801. Oh, and Erica and Holly M. You all have been gifted Legal Bites memberships. So you are more than welcome to come. Please do come on Friday for the next members only live stream or casual stream where we just kind of hang out with those that are in Bite Club, just as a sort of a thank you for everybody that is supporting the channel. So welcome back to all the folks that have been gifted memberships. And thanks again to Sandra for gifting those memberships.
Was your brother there when you were having this conversation with your mother?
My brother was there at some point.
Where was this conversation?
In the foyer, kind of in between the den and the foyer.
Was your dad there?
No, but my dad came in as soon as he heard the argument. And he came in and sort of pushed my mom aside a little. And
what was your mom acting like at this point in time? Was this her usual rage, or was she calm? Or
no, my mom was very sort of real balled up and tense the whole weekend. And, I really only had those 2 conversations with her, but very cold. Seemed to be also really similar to the way I was, tense and I think anticipating. That's the way I read her.
Okay, so she tells you you can't go to the movies. Is that correct?
Right.
And what do you say to her?
Well, I said to her that we had plans. I was supposed to meet a friend and we were late and, that thing. And she had no answer for that and was sort of stammering. And that's when my dad came in and sort of pushed her aside. And that's when I noticed that my brother was next to me or behind me because he didn't talk to me. He spoke to my brother and told him to go upstairs to his room and wait for him.
Oh, God.
While he finished his movie. And then my brother didn't move, didn't know what to do. And I said, no, you're not going to touch my brother. And we had a big argument. It was just a couple sentences. And
What were those sentences? What was he saying?
I don't really remember the sentences, but I was saying that he wasn't going to touch Erik. And he was just ignoring me and telling my brother to his face to get upstairs and wait for him. And my brother left and went upstairs.
And what happened?
My mother came. My dad left, went in the den, and my mother was sort of still standing there and said something to me about that I had ruined the family. And I was just not saying anything. And then my dad came out and took her by the arm and said, come on, Kitty. And they walked into the den, and then my dad closed the doors. And
What did you think was happening?
I was sure that was it. They were in the den, and my dad had closed the doors, and I didn't believe that dad was going to finish any movie or talk to Erik. I thought he was just buying time. And I realized that they had been waiting for Erik to get home, like I had been. And I just freaked out.
What did you think they were doing in the den? What did you think was going to happen?
I thought they were going ahead with their plan to kill us.
Then?
Yes.
So what did you do?
I ran upstairs to tell my brother that it was happening now and that this was it, and they were going to kill us. And I met him at the top of the stairs. He hadn't gone in his room. And I remember sort of being surprised by the fact that he was at the top of the stairs. And I said something to him along those lines, that it's happening and they're going to kill us. And he said something about that he wasn't going to wait for Dad in his room, and that we had to do something. I don't remember exactly who said what, but at some point I said, I'm going to get my gun. And he said he would get his gun. And
How did you feel then?
just hard to describe how I felt, but I had to run as fast as I could. And that my life was sort of slipping away and that we were going to die.
Did you go get your gun?
I did.
And was it in the guest house? The gun?
It was in my guest house, and I ran. I got it. And
Where
I
did
ran.
you go?
Huh?
Where did you go?
I ran to where we had the ammunition
Which was where?
in my brother's car in the front.
Did you see your brother there?
Yes,
Did you load your gun?
and we did.
Did he load his?
Um,
Or did you see?
I just grabbed a bunch of ammunition out of the box, and I was giving him ammunition, and we were just loading as fast as possible. And
Do you remember how many shells you loaded? Do you know?
I don't remember. I remember pulling out all kinds of shells and just loading my gun and having shells on me.
What did you do then?
We ran. My brother had, I guess, got outside through the study doors because he ran toward the study window door, and you had to kind of go over this. I think you had to. We went over the little concrete thing. It was over to the side of the door on the left, and we went through that door and we just sprinted to the room, hoping to get there when they were not expecting us.
And what did you do?
My brother got there first, and we just burst through the doors, and I started firing.
Was the room lit?
No,
Could you see?
no, it
there
was
any
dark. The lights were out, and I remember seeing. I don't remember too well, but I remember seeing shadow right off to the right, and my brother over to the left. He ran off into that direction, and I started firing immediately in the direction of whoever was standing right there.
Was the TV on? Do you remember? Was there any light in the room?
The TV, I remember, I found out later that the TV was on. I don't actually remember the TV being on, but there was probably light in the room from the TV.
When you started firing, do you remember if your parents were standing or seated, or do you have a clear memory of that?
I remember who I realized was my dad at some point, sort of coming forward in my direction. So he was standing, and I remember firing directly at him. I believe he fell back.
Was there a lot of firing going on?
Yeah, my brother was, I guess, firing, and there was things shattering, and the noise was phenomenal, and we fired many times, and there were just glass, and you could hear things breaking, and you could hear the ringing noises from the booms, and there was the smoke from the guns, and it was basically just chaos, and I really didn't know who was firing at who and what was going on. I just was doing firing my gun, and that's what I just was trying to think about, that and not freezing.
This could kind of explain why it was as gruesome as it was in the end. I mean, we all saw the photos from the autopsy. And it was really gruesome. Like there were they completely lit them up, right? And I just remember thinking, like, this looks really, really, really passionate, right? Like this looks like once would have seemingly been enough, right? But understanding that when tensions are as high as they were, and the room being dark, even if lit by a television screen, it's still a dimly lit room. And you're worried that they've got guns, you've got guns, they've got, you think they've got guns, and, you're kind of shooting in multiple directions. You're hearing, at the very least, there's, one other person that has a shotgun, and this is a very loud noise. You don't have ear protection on, by the way, so it's like, I can understand this feeling of chaos and being very much on edge. And if you hear the other one shoot your parents, you could think that might be your parents shooting the other one, right? So I can understand how it just sort of like had this massive unloading of just like so many different shots, lighting their parents up in this kind of a situation if they were as amped up as Lyle says that they were. It's really, really interesting to hear his telling of the specific events that led incrementally from one to the next, because, you know, the statements that they were making, the specific language that Jose and Kitty were using, whether we believe that Jose or Kitty would have done something is not relevant. It's, you know, once again, it is whether we think that they actually believed it. And I think, I mean, for my part, right now, I believe that they felt that way. Like that's the impression that I have. But like I'm a broken record. I still want to hear cross-examination to see how well that holds up. Okay, let's continue.
Do you remember firing a very close shot at your father?
I believe so.
At what part of his body?
From the side, behind, kind of. I ended up there. I don't remember the shot really, but I remember the picture.
The picture you saw here? Are you talking about your dad's head wound?
Yes.
And do you think you did that?
Yes.
At some point, was your gun empty?
Yes.
And was there something about your mother that you learned then, either through Erik, or you saw something or heard something?
Could see sort of behind my dad, really barely, but could see somebody moving, seemed like moving in the direction of where my brother should be. And so I reloaded.
You reloaded? Is that yes?
Yes.
And what did you do after you reloaded?
I ran around and shot my mom.
Where did you shoot her?
I just reached over and I shot her close.
Was that the last shot that was fired? Is that yes?
Yes. Yes.
What did you do after that?
I dropped my gun and I went into the foyer and I sat against the wall.
Where was your brother?
I don't really remember. I remember seeing him later against the other wall.
In the foyer?
Yes.
Did you stay there for a while?
We stayed, I'm not exactly sure how long, but I remember thinking that I had to talk to my brother and seeing him and sort of just being against the wall and just not being able to talk to him. Didn't have the energy. And so I don't know exactly how long we were there, but several minutes, maybe longer.
And at some point, were you able to move?
Yes. At some point, the at some point we got up and
Were you expecting something to happen?
yes.
What were you expecting to happen?
Well, at that point we knew the police hadn't come. So we weren't expecting anything. We knew-
Earlier, had you expected something? When you were
Well,
sitting there?
Yeah, I expected the police. That's what I wanted to talk to my brother about, was the fact that the police were coming.
Why did you think the police were coming?
Well, obviously the police were going to be there, within a few seconds or however long a time it takes them to get there. And I was afraid to talk to him. I wanted to know what my brother was going to say.
Why did you think the police were going to come?
Why did I think they were going to come? Because people would call the police, or they would hear the noise themselves. People roam in Beverly, in the flats, and the police station's only a couple of blocks away. But I really wasn't thinking all this. I was just thinking about what my brother was going to say to the police.
Why were you worried about what your brother was going to say to the police?
I don't know, I just remember sitting against the wall worried that I didn't want him to say everything that had happened. I was maybe say nothing, maybe I just wasn't sure, and I didn't want him to talk about everything that had happened.
What do you mean everything that had happened?
I didn't want him to talk about what happened, his relationship with his dad or my relationship with my dad.
So you remember thinking that, but you couldn't. Did you
Actually, he didn't know about my relationship with my dad, but I just felt like I didn't want that to come out.
Were you able to tell him that at that time?
No, not at that time. At that time, I didn't say anything. I just sat against the wall and waited and figured, well, I just didn't. I don't know. I was so exhausted. I just I couldn't talk to him. I remember trying, and him being against the wall and me just sort of sitting there, stupid, like I couldn't move, paralyzed, and then at some point we did get up and we talked about the fact that nobody had come, and so then we started to talk about what we wanted to do, and I don't know exactly what we decided at that point. I know we decided that we should leave and get out of the house right away in case the police were still coming or somebody would call late or something. I was just didn't want to be in the house at that point. And then we decided to pick up the shells.
Why were you going to pick up the shells?
Because of fingerprints. It's probably sounds like my idea, but I don't really know. And I don't really remember picking them up too well, but we did pick them up.
Did you go back into the room where your parents were?
Yes. And we turned on the lights.
Did you look at your parents?
I didn't.
Do you have any memory of seeing what your parents looked like that night after you shot them?
Just from one or two of the photos.
But do you remember it from seeing them?
No.
Did you look at them?
No.
So you picked up the shells.
We picked up the shells and somehow we ended up getting all of them apparently. But I really wasn't too sure about the idea of whether it would matter to pick up the shells with fingerprints. So we did it pretty hurriedly. So I remember being surprised later that there were no shell casings at all. But we did get them, and we went out.
Did you
I guess we didn't put them in anything. I guess we just grabbed them, and then we immediately grabbed the guns and left the house out the front and went to my brother's car. And
Where did you go from there?
From there, the first thing we did was leave and get out of the area. And actually I was driving, I took a right, and I believe I went to the next street.
Where
And
did you go after that? What was your,
I'm not really sure, but I think we went to the movie theater. We had decided, I remember Erik saying, what are we going to say? And I really didn't know what we were going to say, but the only thing that we could say was that we were at the movies together, which was not a great thing to say, but that's all we could say. And so we decided that we should go and get tickets because the police were going to ask us more than likely for tickets, and we want to show them tickets. And then we also decided we obviously had to get rid of the guns. So at some point we did that. I don't know. I remember doing them, but I don't remember exactly which one first. I think we went to the movie theater first.
what did you do at the movie theater?
We went and parked on the side and ran in, and there was a very few people in line, and we asked the person for tickets to the show that we knew was going to take place that night around 8 o'clock or 8:15, whatever was on the board. And we asked for the movie License to Kill because we had seen it. And she said that had been sold out for that show. And we asked for, we said Batman, because that was the only other movie we had seen. And then she wouldn't sell us the tickets to the Batman show for that show because it was almost over or was ending. Said that she could only sell the tickets like 20 minutes into the show, and I told her we really need tickets for that show, and she wouldn't sell us tickets to that show. So I just went ahead and asked for tickets to the next show, and hoping that there was no time on them, and there was a time on them.
Yeah, there's always
So
a time on the
I
tab.
believe my brother had the tickets, so I think he just threw them away, and we left.
And where did you go after that?
Again, I really don't remember if we went to do the guns at that point. We may have. I'm pretty sure we did, and we went.
What area did you get rid of the guns?
Yes,
What area did you get rid
we
of?
went to the area that I normally took to get into the valley, Coldwater Canyon, where we knew where there were mountains, some place where we could put the guns. So we drove up to Coldwater and onto Mulholland at some point and drove along there until I found a spot that seemed like I could pull over and we could put the guns down the mountainside.
And who took the guns out?
My brother.
And what did you do while he was taking the guns out?
I just circled the car around because we had to come back the other way because I was still going to try and make it to meet Perry if I could. And so I circled around and he was finished by that point. And he had run down and put the guns down and come back up. So he got in the car and we continued driving to try and make it to the Taste of LA.
And did something happen on the way to the Taste of LA?
My brother had some blood on his pants, and I also realized we still had the shells. And so we stopped at a gas station along the way, and the big dumpsters. We just pulled over and did the best we could. Me searching the car for all the shells and anything else that might be in there. And him changing his pants. And I may have changed something also. I don't remember exactly.
How
But-
did you happen to have clothes in the car?
Well, his car was filled with clothes, tennis clothes, shoes, just sports stuff, as well as other clothes. It was like a second room for Erik, the back of his hatchback. And so we just pulled things out of there, what we thought would look possible. And so after we did that as fast as we could, because we were trying to get to meet Perry.
How were you feeling at that time?
Numb. I was just feeling numb, exhausted, heavy, still in just shock that really that the police hadn't come, and that we were sort of, now this was going on, and trying to think clearly as to, I really felt there was a small chance that they weren't going to figure out what happened. And so,
What did you think about what you had done?
I didn't really think about it at that point. I was just lost and numb and thinking about what we were doing.
After you changed your clothes, did you then go to the Taste of LA?
After we changed our clothes, we went straight to the Taste of LA. We got a little bit lost, but we found it.
Who got out of the car when you got there?
I got out of the car.
How was Erik doing at that point?
He was not doing well. When we left the house, I could barely drive his stick shift, and was sort of trembling from just having been in the room, picking up the shells and leaving. And he was in worse shape, really, mostly because he was crying and just saying, oh my God, and shaking. And he was still in pretty bad shape even after we had kind of done the thing at the gas station, and now he was at the Taste of LA. And I was a little bit concerned of what was going to happen when I found Perry and Erik in the car in that shape. But still, I felt like I wanted to get Perry for some reason.
Why did you want to get to Perry? What was so important about that?
Well, my brother was asking me the same question, and I felt just like I wanted to go back with somebody else and not have to call the police myself. And I just felt like the police weren't going to show up, and I was going to have to eventually call. And maybe Perry coming with me would be easier.
Easier in what way?
Just comfort, just there. I was going to have to talk to the police anyway myself, and then Perry wasn't going to be able to help me through any of it. But just have my, he was the only friend I had in the area. And he wasn't the closest friend in the world, but he was somebody that was somewhat close. So there's no good reason, just basically some comfort to go with me, just so we weren't alone. For some reason, my brother was no comfort for me. I was starting to feel the loss. And
What do you mean starting to feel the loss?
I was feeling a distance from Erik for some reason. I remember feeling like what we had done was really bad, and feeling real dirty about it, or just kind of bad. And that my brother was bad also, and just not wanting to be, the blood on his pants, and just not, he was no comfort for me. It was more like reminding me, and I was trying to think about what was coming. And I felt like Perry, I needed somebody there, and other than my brother, who was really just a man.
It seems like he needed someone who was there that wasn't already tainted by the event. That's what it seems like. It seems like he's struggling to get there, but that he's trying to describe basically that. Let me get some questions here. Let's see here. Yeah, Menendez case. Can we have a poll on their level of guilt now? Yeah, let me do that right now, and then I'm gonna answer a couple questions here. Okay. Yay, we've got a polly poll. At this point, do you think the brothers are guilty of murder? Yes or no? Vote in the chat right now. And then in the meantime, I'm going to answer a couple questions. Dater says in earlier streams, you said that Lyle sometimes seems to act out his father, how his father was saying things when he was talking about memories of his father. Does he seem to do it with his mother? It's interesting. I haven't gotten that impression today with the way that he was asked, how did your mother say this, or how did she respond? I don't seem to have that impression of the way that he's describing his mother. And I think that it's almost as if like it's reflective of the closeness of his relationship with his father as opposed to his mother. I'm not sure. And Veronica be guilty of murder or manslaughter. I'm specifically saying murder. So we can do another poll for manslaughter. Right. Dater says, also, you watched the testimony of one victim that managed to escape Jeffrey Dahmer, right? I feel like I need that building of the scene and the fear. That testimony made me feel the fear. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I understand it, at least, even if he's keeping kind of a cool demeanor about it while he's sort of talking about it. I don't know. I can see the progression, and I can understand the emotional progression as a result. I'm wondering if Erik's testimony is going to be a bit more emotional because he was known as the one that would cry more. He was known as the one who had a harder time. He would have a harder time controlling his emotions. So we'll keep that poll going for a bit. And Shireen, what is the sentencing time for manslaughter? I actually have to look that up. Let me look that up, and we'll continue watching, and we'll keep the poll open for a few more minutes while we do that. Okay, let's continue on here.
A mess. And so I went and tried to find him, and he wasn't there.
Did you call him?
I called him. He wasn't there, and so I called him at his house, and he was at his house, and he said that he had waited and we hadn't shown up, so he left. And I told him I really got to talk to him, and could he meet me somewhere and we could talk. And I believe he suggested that this restaurant in Beverly Hills called the Cheesecake Factory, and I said, okay, that was good, and we would meet him there, and however long it took us to get there. And then I believe I called him again a little bit later.
Do you remember for sure whether you called him a second time?
Not for sure, but I know that I did.
Okay. So, quick update. Voluntary manslaughter in California, at least today anyway. I'm not sure if it's different than it was back then, but it's I'm reading 3, 6, or 11 years in the California State Prison, a fine of up to $10,000. So if they had been not convicted of murder but convicted of voluntary manslaughter, they would have been out a long time ago. So I mean, even with that maximum of 11 years. Okay, I'll end this poll now, and this is specifically for murder. The result is, at this point, do you think the brothers are guilty of murder? 71% said no, 28% said yes. Now we'll do one for manslaughter. Let me do that real quick. All right. New poll. At this point, do you think the brothers are guilty of voluntary manslaughter? And we'll continue listening to testimony. We've got about 10 minutes left of testimony here.
How do you know that you did?
And then can we do one with all three options? Yes, I'll do that after this. How's that? We'll do this one for a few minutes and then we'll do a mixed poll.
Because I've seen the records.
But you don't have a clear memory on your own?
No.
Did you then drive back and meet him at the Cheesecake Factory?
No.
Why
And,
not?
well, we wanted to drive back and meet him at the Cheesecake Factory, but in driving there, I started to lose control of myself, and which was, I was afraid of that was going to happen. And the whole thing was Perry was in the hopes that I could hold it together long enough to be able to meet with Perry and go back to the house. And that was clearly not going to happen. And I was starting to shake, and I may have been crying. I don't remember, but I remember feeling both with myself and with my brother, there was no way we could meet Perry and him not know that something terrible had happened. So I didn't want to cancel the idea. So I drove around. I remember driving around for a little while first. And then at some point was just started to fall apart more. And so I said, nothing I could do. I just have to forget about Perry and go and call the police myself.
So did you go back to the house? Is that yes?
Yes.
Did you go into the house?
Yes.
Did you go into the room where your parents were?
My brother went in the room, and I went in the room and started screaming, and I went in the room to get him and pull him out. And I did pull him out, and I believe I went upstairs to call.
You called the police?
Call the police.
Is that the 911 tape that's been played here in
Right.
court?
Right.
And on that tape, you're crying.
Yes.
Is that real?
Yes.
Why were you crying?
Well, I don't know. That's why I was calling. Was because I was crying, and
What were you crying
I
about?
don't know if I was crying before I went in the house or not. If I was just totally shaken, and after I went in the room and my brother's reactions, I don't know. I was crying. And
Why?
Why?
What was upsetting you?
Just the shock. Just not believing that this was happening to me, and that my parents were dead, and that I was about to call the police. And it's really hard to describe the weekend and the stress and the fear and nervousness and caving in feelings. I was really marginal throughout as it got closer to what actually happened. And by then I was just really raw and just crying for crying's sake. I don't know, crumbling. And I remember my brother apparently went back in the room, started screaming again. I was telling him to get out of the room.
And you called the police, and then what happened?
I called the police.
Real quick. Sorry. I'm going to end this poll. Okay. So for voluntary manslaughter, at this point, do you think the brothers are guilty of voluntary manslaughter? We've got 75% yes, 25% no. Interesting. Okay. So now let's do one final poll. Okay. Here's a mixed poll. Do you think they are guilty at this point? Yes, murder. Yes, voluntary manslaughter, or no? Obviously, if you think murder, you think yes, voluntary manslaughter. So go from like the highest one that you think that they are guilty of at this point. Um, so that'll be an interesting poll. All right.
And the lady was, I don't remember, it was a lady, I believe, that answered the phone. And
Do you remember that from then or from hearing the tape?
really from the tape, yeah, because I don't really remember what I said other than telling my brother to get out of the room. I remember that.
Did the police come then at some point?
No, they called again and told me to come out of the house. They wouldn't come in.
And did you come out of the house?
We came out of the house.
And I'm sorry, one more interruption here because I should have done this before. Igloo Pops is I legit don't know the difference between murder and voluntary manslaughter. So murder is premeditated. You are planning to kill someone, you kill someone. Premeditation doesn't take a long drawn out plan. You can form premeditation in a moment. But the difference is voluntary manslaughter is a voluntary killing. So in other words, like you have decided to kill someone. It's not like, it's an accident, for example, like, you happen to be unreasonably wielding an axe and you lose control of it and it kills someone, right? Like you for one reason or another, there is some level of intent, but not as much as like actually intending to kill someone, beforehand. But basically it's I'll just read the definition. It's an unlawful killing of a human being that occurs during a sudden quarrel, in the heat of passion, or based on an honest but unreasonable belief in the need to defend yourself. So do you think that they honestly believed that they needed to defend themselves, but that was an unreasonable belief? Looking at them objectively, that subjectively, you think that they actually did believe that they needed to kill their parents in order to defend themselves, but that objectively you're able to step back and say, but they didn't actually need to. That would be voluntary manslaughter. I hope that explains it.
And they just took over.
And at some point, did they take you down to the police station?
Yes.
Were you interviewed by Sergeant Edmonds?
Yes.
And did you admit to him that you had killed your parents?
No.
Why not?
We had decided before that we wouldn't.
Who went in first?
My brother.
And you had talked about what you were going to tell the police?
We had, before I called the police when we were driving around, and then when we were in the car, I believe it was when we were in the car, I asked him what he was going to do, because he was really hysterical, crying on the ground, rolling around. He was really, I think it was from seeing my parents more than anything. But I asked him what he wanted to do, and something like that. And he's, whether he was going to go ahead with what we had said or whether he was going to tell him, because if he was going to tell him, I didn't want to go in and give this stupid story that, and just, if he was going to tell him, then I wanted to know so that I could tell him also. And he said that he would, no, it's okay. I don't want to tell, we'll just say what we said we were going to say, something to that effect. And I said, okay, well, I wasn't too sure about whether he was really going to be able to hold it together. So I told him, you just let me know, you try and go in and talk first and you let me know if it's okay.
Did you think he was going to be able to tell these lies?
I did not think he was going to be able to. Why? Because he was in very bad shape afterwards. And I was trying to get him to relax and keep him together and not let him know how it was affecting me, and just kind of keep him relaxed. And I couldn't. He was really all over the place, and the police officer there was trying to help us also. And so I really didn't have a lot of faith that he was going to be able to keep the story, but it was such I was just hoping that he would, because I really didn't want to have to talk about it all.
And after your brother talked to Sergeant Edmonds, did he say anything to you?
My brother?
Yes.
My brother came out and said, it's okay, you can talk to him. And I believe he also came over and said something else. It's, you can, I don't remember exactly, but he whispered something else about that I could stay with what we had talked about. So I did that. And I was nervous going in also, because I figured, these are police officers and they're going to know I'm lying. And I just felt they were going to know. And I had no idea how my brother got through it. So I went in and I talked to him, and he asked me a bunch of questions. And I just tried to, I really wasn't sure what I was saying, but I was answering some of them and trying to keep with the story that we had made up, and also just whatever I could do to make him not think that it was us, basically.
At some point you left the police station, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you realize later that you had left something back at the house or near the house that could show that you were the ones who killed your parents?
Yes.
Did you return to the house?
We returned to the house. The next one, they kept our car and taped it in, which I had felt they were going to do. And just that night I stayed at Mark Heffernan's. And
What time did you go back?
I'm not sure, very early in the morning.
And did you ask if you could get into your car? Or did you get into your car?
No, I didn't ask if I could get into my car. I don't think I got to ask anything. I think they sent me away. I had taken a cab over, I think. Yeah. And
Did you go back again?
then I went back again, and somewhere around 8 o'clock or something, when it was a little bit more a reasonable time. And then I just sort of said I wanted to get in a few things. I believe I said I wanted to get a few things out of the house, and was trying to find a way to get over to the car to search it myself before they did, because I knew that as soon as I searched the car, I just had a feeling that that was going to be it, because the car was going to have wrappings from when we bought it, or extra shells or whatever. I mean, I just had not had time or the light even to search it real well at the gas station. It was kind of like a frenzied thing trying to get to Perry's. I hadn't really thought about it like I did. And then that night I said, I thought we were going to jail. And so I
Did
called
you get back into the car?
I did.
And did you find any other wrappings or shells or anything?
The guy let me search the car to just get a few things, and I was able to do a pretty good job. And I did find quite a few things.
And did you take them?
Yes.
And those things were all in the car at the point in time that you called the police the night before?
Yes.
Your Honor, could we break at this point?
All right.
All right.
4:35, and we'll take our recess for the afternoon, and for the week, we'll return on Monday at 9 o'clock. Don't discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else, and don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll see both juries back here at 9 o'clock Monday morning.
Okay. All right. taking some other notes here. Well, that was quite a lot. This feels like this is probably going to be about the end of his direct testimony. So I thought we were going to get into some cross-examination, but obviously it was still a very, very, very eventful session here, talking about how they got from the moment that Erik told Lyle that the abuse was still going on, all the way up until the point where they killed their parents, and then obviously beyond when they disposed of the evidence, really, and then went to the police and called 911 and gave their statements and all this kind of stuff. It's very, very, very interesting to hear from the horse's mouth, like, how this progression happened, because that's one of the big questions here is if what was this trigger on what their fear was, what was, if you actually believe that they did have fear. Let me end this poll really quickly. So this final poll that we have, this hybrid poll, where we are asking here, do you think they are guilty at this point? The number one vote here is yes for voluntary manslaughter. 73% of folks said yes, voluntary manslaughter. 14% said no, and 11% said yes for murder. So, if we boiled this down to 12 people on a jury, you can see how people would be how they could end up with a hung jury on this one. Obviously, we have not finished all of the testimony here. We haven't gotten through his cross-examination. We haven't heard from Erik at all yet. And there will be other people that we will be hearing from after Erik as well. So this is going to be very, very interesting to continue to watch. I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot to digest here. But I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and going through this case with me. And Care Bear says there's still a few more hours of direct, and then we get the interesting and frustrating cross from prosecutor Pamela Buzanich. Okay, well then, so maybe next time we still won't see cross-examination. It'll probably still be direct examination at that point. But I'm certain there's still going to be plenty of interesting stuff that we'll be hearing from him next week now. So this was part 4 of Lyle Menendez's testimony. Next week will be part 5. It's crazy that it's that long, but I mean, obviously it's a huge case, and he's one of the main witnesses here that we are hearing from. So yeah, I appreciate you guys going through this whole journey with me to go through this case and sort of make up our minds as we go. Am I muted? I don't think I am. Let me hang on here. Oh, no. I think I'm good. Yeah, on mine, the sound is fine. Okay. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me. And thank you to all the folks that are listening, either lurking while live, or those that are on replay. Thank you to everybody in the chat for engaging in discussion. I love people pointing out, points and counterpoints for either side, and doing so in a way that just shows that we can go through this and pick it apart from either perspective in a way that is still respectful and caring of one another, which is just great. It's one of the things that I love about this community. And thank you to all the members that are in chat, folks that have joined, and also those that have gifted memberships. And thank you, of course, always to the mods for helping to direct the conversation here as well. So, okay, with that will be, that'll be about it. Okay, guys. Friday, I'll see the members in our members only live stream. And otherwise, we've got some more content that I'm working on to come out, some pre-recorded stuff. So hopefully that will get out sooner rather than later this week as well. I think that's about it. All right, guys.